Welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm going to do a deep dive into Frog Monarchs of the Edison format. I'm going to show you how the cards work, interactions, deck lists, side decks, combos, weaknesses. I'm going to show it all to you so you guys can play yourself at a high level and enjoy this just as much as I have. Let's do it. So here's a typical Frog Monarch deck list. We're not going to go into anything specific. We're just going to lay out a core ground for you guys to understand what's happening with this deck and why it functions the way it does, and then you can understand newer players' deck lists that have evolved in the format or gotten more creative, like with Junk Synchron or hero packages and any of these type of things. It's a good idea to just start at the ground zero, understand what's going on here. So this is a very basic version of Frog Monarch, Frog Narc, whatever you'd like to call it. So we have triple Ryza, 3 Caius, 2 Thestellos, 3 Battle Fader, 3 Swap Frog, 3 Substitute, 2 Dark Dust Spirit, 2 Latent Darkness Dragon, 2 Dupe Frog, 2 Treeborn, 1 Gorz, 1 Trigodia. Now the spells is basically the rest of the deck. This deck is very monster heavy, and it relies on a Monarch summon every turn. So we're not going to really play traps. We're just going to want to use magic cards and monsters. So we have 3 Enemy Controller, 2 Pot of Avarice, 1 Brain Control, 3 Soul Exchange, 1 Nobleman of Extermination. I enjoy this card. Consider it. And Mystical Space Typhoon, Heavy Storm, and Foolish Burial. So this is the core of the deck. Not very complicated. We're going to get into what these monsters do, what these spells do, and how it facilitates the whole deck running itself. Alright, so we're going to get into the frogs of the Frog Monarch. Without this, it really wouldn't be playable. So we got the 2 Treeborn, the 2 Dupe, the 3 Swap Frog, and the 3 Substitute. So Treeborn Frog, let's get a nice one out here. Ooh. Treeborn Frog is the main card of the deck. This card, during the standby phase, will let you special summon from the graveyard himself in, I guess, any position, usually in defense, and that allows you to have a free monster on the field to tribute summon. The one thing about Treeborn you guys should know is in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! You can only use this once per standby phase, but in Edison format, this is as many times as you'd like as long as you only control 1. So, for example, later on I'll show some combos, but you can standby phase, special summon it in defense during the standby phase, and in the same defense you could use Enemy Controller to tribute this and take a monster, and then still activate this Treeborn Frog again, bringing him back, giving you 2 tributes to summon a larger monster. So that is why Treeborn is, one of the best frogs, and the one we use the most, like, every turn. Dupe Frog, there's a combo which I'll show later that allows you to dupe lock your opponent. Basically, this card's name becomes Dave Frog when it's on the field, doesn't matter. Monsters your opponent controls cannot target monsters for attacks except for this one. When this card's sent from the field to the graveyard, you can add 1 frog monster from your deck to your hand except Dupe Frog. So, there's a few things with this card. So first of all, when you have 2 Dupe Frogs on the field, like so in defense usually, your opponent can't select anything to attack because it must attack Dupe Frog, and this Dupe Frog says it has to attack that Dupe Frog. That Dupe Frog says it has to attack this Dupe Frog. So that's the dupe lock. That is something you're going to go to. That's why you play 2. But a secondary effect to add a frog to your hand is excellent. You can add a Swap Frog or a Treeborn Frog, but it has to be the last thing that happens in a chain. So for example, if my opponent summons a monster and attacks over this, and my effect happens when it dies, I can search a Swap Frog. But if I tribute summon this for a Monarch, and I target something with the Monarch, that Monarch's effect happens when this is supposed to be happening, and it misses timing. So that's kind of important. Generally, you're gonna want to leave these on the field anyways, but you got to remember that this has to be the last thing that happens in the chain link. Next up is Swamp Frog. This is kind of the glue that keeps this deck together, because you're figuring, well, the Treeborn Frog has to be in the grave. This is how you get it to the graveyard. So when you summon, I guess it has multiple effects. I'll just read it. You can discard one water monster to special summon this card from your hand. When this card is summoned, you can select and send one level 2 or low aqua water monster from your deck or your side of the field to the graveyard. Once per turn, you can turn one monster you control to the hand to normal summon one frog monster, except for Swap Frog or Frog the Jam, in addition to your normal summon. So the first effect is you can normal summon it and send either Treeworn Frog, a Dupe Frog, or a Substitoad, since they all qualify for this condition. Secondly, you can discard any of these cards to special summon it. Let's just say you would want to do that if you have a big play or you want to use its third effect on a Monarch, or if you need to summon a Light and Darkness Dragon as an example. You'll need 2 tributes, but they have done something that makes it so you cannot get a second guy on the field. And so its third effect is quite powerful in the late game, which is why you generally want to leave 1 or 2 in the graveyard, in the deck if possible, and that is to target a card on the field and bounce it back to the hand, not just Swap Frog. And then you can summon a frog from your hand, which is also how you get dupe frogs out of your hand and still get the dupe lock. So lastly, this is a toad, not a frog. Don't get it twisted. This card, banned for a reason. You contribute 1 monster to special summon 1 frog monster from your deck, except Frog the Jam. Frog monsters except Frog the Jam cannot be destroyed by battle. That effect is not really relevant, but it could play out in certain circumstances, especially when Dupe Frog has 2,000 defense, he has 2,000 defense, but mainly the fact that you can turbo through all of your frogs in 1 turn with Substitoad because it's not once per turn. So as an example, I could lone summon this, tribute it, and special summon a Swap Frog, and use Swap Frog's effect to send a Treeborn to the graveyard. Or I can also do something along the lines of summon Substitoad and have another monster and send that for Swap Frog, then send that for another Swap Frog, then send that for another Swap Frog, then send that for Dupe Frog. And the combos I'll show later, but this is why this card is very, very good in this deck. You want to play 3. So this is basically the standard, which most decks will play. That's the basic stuff for frogs. That's what we need to know for that. Again, later there will be some combos and whatnot that I can show you guys. Next, we're probably going to go into the Monarchs, which is the main point of the deck. We got the 3 Ryzas, we got the 3 Caius, and the 2 Thestellos. We'll go into the other tributes in a moment, but for starters, we're going to just have these cards. So let's start off with something nice we can look at here. So Ryza, you just tribute it, and you target 1 card on the field and return it to the top of the owner's deck. Excellent card, because in Edison there's not many ways to draw many cards. So you're essentially just putting your opponent a turn behind. With Monarchs and all of these, you always target a card, preferably the monster on the field when you summon it, because even if they have skill drain or something like that, many cards affect this card when it's summoned, and so you want to target the monster, and if your opponent responds with something, that effect will still happen. And vice versa, if you're playing against it, you want to ask for the target first before you activate, for example, Bottomless Trap Hole, because if they are bad or they just decide that they want to target your back row and hit the Bottomless Trap Hole, your effect will still activate, and you want them to only target that. So always target a monster when you summon, assuming the summon is successful, but there's only 1 Solemn in the game. Okay? That card's pretty excellent. Next we have a Caius. So Caius is an excellent monster because it banishes a dark monster. It banishes a card on the field, and if it's a dark monster, they take 1,000 damage. So this effect can be applied in a few ways. First of all, we can look at it in the sense that same as Ryza, where you summon and you can remove a problem card. Always target a monster, unless they only have back row, obviously. But secondly, if it's a dark monster, you can inflict 1,000 damage to your opponent. So if your opponent is low, you can actually target himself and deal 1,000 damage to your opponent. Excellent card. There's a reason why this card is so expensive right now. Not just because it's a turbo pack card, but because Edison, if you're playing any Caius, it's 2 to 3 in your deck. The card is very, very strong. And the last Monarch we're going to play, again, this is, some people have shied away from this because of late game. This card is not as effective, but I like this card. It stops combo decks from having the correct pieces, and more so, I just enjoy the surprise of, you know, randomly I'm going to take something out of your hand, and taking something out of your opponent's hand is never good for them. And so I play it, I suggest it, but I can understand why people move away from it. But for the sake of this video, we're going to explain and show you this stuff. So Thestellos, when he is summoned, you can discard a card from your opponent's hand. But if it's a monster card, you inflict damage to your opponent's life points equal to the level of the monster times 100. The burn effect isn't really relevant. You should be careful about Gore's, because Gore's secondary effect can activate on this card if you miss the discarding Gore's from their hand. But overall, just a good piece that you would want to summon when you don't need to remove something off the field. So this is a good option. So that's all the Monarchs that we're going to play. It's the core of the deck with the Frogs and the Monarchs. That's the name Frog Monarch, Frog Monarch, whatever you'd like to call it. Put that away. So next we have Light and Darkness Dragons. These are the big tributes. And we have Dark Dust Spirits. So the reason why I'm bringing these up is because, first of all, the Light and Darkness Dragon is an excellent late game card. This card allows you to just completely shut down your opponent. It has many effects here. So this card can't be special summoned. When this card is face up on the field, its attribute is also treated as a dark monster. That's not really relevant unless they can Caius this when it has no negation effects. When a spell or trap is activated, or the effect of an effect monster is activated, the activation is negated and this card loses 500 attack and defense. When this card is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, select one monster in your graveyard and destroy all cards you control and special summon that monster. So there's a few things with this. So first of all, for the negation effect, it only negates the first thing that happens in a chain. So for example, I'm going to use a DD Crow, and I'll chain a Book of Moon. So whatever card I will play first will be negated. So if I want to stop an attack, I would activate DD Crow and chain Book of Moon to the Light and Darkness Dragon's attack, putting it face down. So you got to be wary of that. It also doesn't destroy it, it just negates it. So for example, if you had a Treeborn Frog, you can summon it as many times as you want to negate your own effect, and it would just negate it in the graveyard, and you could keep coming back and forth, and that's a good way to run out of negations and destroy it or tribute it. Secondly, you don't want to summon this when you're, like, generally when my opponent has 3 or more cards, I don't really want to summon it, but if they have 3 or less cards, I summon this, and it's pretty much game over. There's not much they can do, and when they finally get over this card, you just summon another big guy out of your graveyard, usually a Monarch, but sometimes you can get a Gorz, Trigodia, or some cool combos with Swap Frog later on. And the last thing I should mention is that the 500 attack and defense that it loses, this guy can't go below a certain amount. Like, you have to be able to lose 500, so that's how you know there is a limit to his negation. It can't just go below 0 or go to 0. So that's Light and Darkness Dragon. Very, very strong card. Love that card a lot. Super cool card. Next we have Dark Dust Spirit. So this card is my way to deal with aggressive decks, especially like dragons. And it's a very simple effect when it's summoned. Well, you can't special summon it. During the end phase of the turn that is normal summoned, or flip face up, return it to the hand because it's a spirit. When this card is normal summon or flip face up, so sometimes you can set it and your opponent attacks into it and its effect activates. When it's flipped up or summoned, destroy all other face-up monsters. So this card will be good when your opponent summons a bunch of dragons. You can just summon this card, blow up all their cards, poke them for 2200, put it back in your hand. Your opponent knows they have to deal with this on the next turn. Very, very annoying. So these are the main dudes that you have in the deck. Not much else to say about that. Next is we have some stuff to protect you. Because you can only normal summon once per turn with Monarchs, you're going to need some defense. So we got the Trigodia, the Gores, and the triple Battle Fader. So Trigodia plays a few parts to this deck. First of all, the the summon during the battle phase when you take damage is excellent. You don't have to have nothing on the field, unlike Gores, so this card can be dropped. And Monarchs like to hoard cards in their hand, so you're going to be able to get this guy pretty strong. So you can special summon this card from your hand when you take battle damage. This card gains 600 attack and defense for each card in your hand. Once per turn, you can send one monster from your hand to the graveyard to take control of one face-up monster your opponent controls with the same level as the sent monster. So this is good in the mirror match, but also when your opponent summons a Monarch themselves, you can just take it. There's a few other smaller cards that you can use, like Swap Frog and very rarely like a Treeborn Frog, but mainly just the level 2s and level 6s you can discard to take their cards. Once per turn, you can select one monster in your graveyard. This card's level becomes the same level as that monster. So that is also pretty good because you can lower the level and use it with tuners that you can steal from your opponent using enemy controller and that kind of thing. That's a rare effect, but good thing to keep in mind. Next we have Gores. Here's Gores. Gores is a little bit more telegraphed, but in Monarchs it's not because you never play back row. So it has two effects. When you take damage from a card, while you control no cards, while a card your opponent controls, while you control no cards, you can special summon this card from your hand and activate one of the effects. So the first effect is you make a token based on the damage you took. It's a fairy light level 4? No, level 7. Same as this thing. The light attribute matters if you, for whatever reason, have an honest in hand, but other than that, it's just a large token that you'll get. But also affect damage, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the amount of damage you took. So it's kind of like a, I take it, you take it, but it's, can get you out of a pinch. So that's Gores, a little bit more telegraphed, but also like not in this deck, which makes it extremely strong, and it gives you free tributes with the token. And lastly, we have the Battle Fader. So the Battle Fader is pretty straightforward. When your opponent monster declares an attack, direct attack, you special summon this card from your hand at the end of and it ends the battle phase. If this card is special summoned with this effect, remove it from play when it's removed from the field. So you're just going to summon this guy when they attack, and if they don't kill it, you get a free tribute. That's pretty much how that goes, but more so it ends the battle phase. One thing to note is you do activate it in your hand, you reveal it and special summon it, so your opponent could activate something in response to this, like Royal Oppression as an example, whereas your opponent cannot use Royal Oppression for these cards because it's during the damage step. This happens when the attack is declared. So those are all like the pretty straightforward monsters. I'm just saying stupid things now. And so then we move on to the spells. So this Foolish, pretty self-explanatory. You just send a Treeborn. A Heavy Storm. You got to be careful of Starlight Roads, but Starlight Road isn't too bad for you if you have an out to the Stardust, like a Monarch. Or you want to attack for game, you can always have enemy controller. Mystical Space Typhoon. The quick effect sometimes is relevant. You can set it like a trap and use it on your opponent's turn, but mainly when you draw, you can activate this, especially in the standby phase. There's some things you could probably do with that. Nobleman of Extermination. I like this card. I have in the deck. I've seen it in a few different decks, but it's not a mainstay in the deck. It just, you target a back row and you destroy it. If it's a trap card, you can remove from play all trap cards from their deck of that name. This is also old style rulings where, like Mind Crush, Nobleman of Crossout, things like this, where it removes all copies. If your opponent cannot reveal 3 cards of, for example, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, damn it. Dimensional Prison. If your opponent can't reveal 3 Dimensional Prison with this card, you can look in their deck because you're technically allowed to have 3 in your deck. Same thing with Mind Crush, you'd be allowed to look at their hand if they can't, Nobleman, if they don't remove all the monsters from their deck. Yeah, so that's why I like that card. Brain Control, just another card to take their card and tribute summon, but also you can just go for game, make large pushes by just paying 800 life points. We have 3 Soul Exchange. So Soul Exchange is also excellent. Even though you lose your battle phase, you get to tribute one of their cards. This also works in combo with Substitute, because your Substitute doesn't say tribute a monster on your side of the field, it just says you can tribute a monster. So you can use Soul Exchange to take their monster and cycle through, which is how you can get an easy dupe block. So like I said, the no battle phase isn't particularly damaging to this deck. Enemy Controller, we're going to max this out. This card is just going to be for taking your opponent's monsters and killing them, or taking your opponent's monsters and getting rid of problem cards by tribute summoning. Jeez, talking a lot. And lastly, 2 Pot of Avarice. Pot of Avarice is just an excellent card. It's just extremely strong. You put back all your Monarchs late game to summon, like have your deck just stocked up with Monarchs for every turn. Here's a nice one to look at. Or you can put back your frogs in the beginning of the game to keep cycling and allow yourself later on to have extra swap frogs in your hand for special summoning. So that's the main deck. That's it. That was a lot. We're going to take a quick second break here while I just move over to what the side deck will kind of look like, and we'll get into that. So this is the side deck that I have right now for my Frog Monarchs. 2 Dust Tornado, 1 Treacherous Trap Hole, 2 Vanity's Fiend, 2 DD Crow, 2 Raikou, a Jinzo, a Mobius, a Burial from Different Dimension, a System Down, Smashing Ground, and a Soul Release. So this is all just generic stuff that's going to be used for most of the tournament that you would go to, and this just hits a variety of decks, but mainly there's a few cards that are kind of mandatory. So the first thing that I'll mention is the cards that we'll definitely need to protect ourselves. So I would go with these to begin with. We have our 2 Dust Tornado, our Mobius, and our Burial. Now these cards are very important because 99% of people are going to side in Different Dimension Crow. This card will target a Treeborn Frog, so we'll get into how to play around this later on, but these cards are basically what you're going to need to put in every single game, because this is for DD Crow or another Soul Release that might hit you. Dust Tornadoes also stop cards like Royal Oppression can hurt, Skilled Ring can hurt. You also might want to stop like them setting a card like Phoenix Wing Blast or their own Dust Tornadoes for stopping whatever you have. You're also going to be looking into hitting things like Goes in Match or Rivalry of Warlords in specific matchups. And lastly, Mobius. Mobius is a great card. You don't have to choose 2 cards to destroy. You could just choose 1 if you're scared of Starlight Road, but this card is good for clearing back rows, but also in some rare cases can be used to get through Rivalry of Warlords or Goes in Match. So these cards are kind of always sided no matter what. These are the kind of cards that we're going to have a spread for. So Jinzo is against a back row heavy deck. Obviously you just summon him, you can just do monster damage for no reason. Vanity's Fiend is excellent versus stuff like dragons, fairies, anything that has recursion monsters like giant rats, mystic tomatoes, and that kind of thing. Zombies, essentially a combo deck, will be hurt quite badly by this tribute summon. We're going to go with Raikou. I side this card in. This card hits back row. Mills 3 helps you get to your Treeborn Frogs or any frogs, fills up for Pot of Avarices. If you didn't side 1 out, you still have 1, but if you have 2, and also setting a monster your opponent will think it's a 2000 defense, they could run into this and you just get a free destruction off. 2 Different Dimension Crows, some Mirror Match, Zombies, sometimes Hero, Blackwing if they're playing Vayu Turbo. This is also strong. There's a reason why most decks side 2 to 3. It's an excellent card. 1 Treacherous Trap Hole. This card is just good for bopping random random people in the tournament, they have no real way to play around this except for Dust Tornado. You just hit them with that. Soul Release, this is purely for the mirror match. This card you should be also scared of. Select up to 5 cards in either player's graveyard and remove them from play. So you definitely, games 2 and 3, only want to send one Treeborn Frog to the graveyard at a time so that this card doesn't max clap your cheeks. System down, this is just a good card versus machines. Some people don't play it, some people play Cyber Dragon. They both work the same, they're both very good. I just prefer to just remove all the problems. Yeah, and I play one smashing. This deck, it's kind of annoying to deal with playing against Absolute Zero, so I like smashing ground. It's also good against some kind of control or anti-meta decks. Just overall, might be okay in the mirror match. You're generally not going to do that stuff, but decent card. Alright, so there's only one main combo of this deck, and that is using Substitute to turbo through most of your stuff and get yourself a dupe lock. So if you summon this card by itself, you contribute this card and you'd special summon one Swap Frog from your deck. The Swap Frog's effect would send Treeborn Frog to the graveyard, and then you'd use its effect to send it back to your hand you can normal summon a frog summon again. People call it a frog summon because you can only summon a frog. This would stay in your hand. That's a very basic way to get Treeborn into your graveyard if you open Substitute. If you go second, however, if you go second, I'll do this one first. If you go second and you can summon this card and use Soul Exchange, you contribute their monster to special summon a frog from your deck, and you're going to get a Swap Frog, and the Swap Frog is going to send yourself the other Substitute because you don't want to draw that. And then you're going to tribute this with Substitute's effect again to get another Swap Frog, and Swap Frog will send the other Substitute that you have in your deck, and so Substitute will tribute Swap Frog again, and you're going to want to leave one Swap Frog in your deck for late game, but also for Dupe Frog's effect if it ever gets destroyed. But you summon this card, and you'll get out this from your deck, and you'll do it again and get this out, and then you'll get this out, and then here you're going to tribute Substitutes for its own effect to get out the other Dupe Frog. Now if you have it in your hand, you would get the other Swap Frog and then return it to your hand and summon this. And it's okay that it's in attack mode because you can't be attacked right now. They'd have to summon a Monarch over it. It's pretty much the only way to get through this right now, or an enemy controller would steal it and then they can do their own things, and that would leave you with the Swap Frog in your hand instead of in the deck. But that's if it's in your hand. Otherwise you would just get out of the deck like that. So that's if you go second, but also I guess I'll show you, you could do the exact same thing if you had this and a Substitute, and let's just say you opened like another one of these or Substitute, whatever. The combo is the very same. You're going to special summon this with its effect, discarding a Treeborn Frog, and you'll send a card to the graveyard, the Substitute out of your deck, and then you'll normal summon the Substitute here and proceed to do the exact same combo that I showed you earlier. You're going to summon this card, send this card, tribute this card for this card, tribute this card for this card, and tribute this card for this card. And it's also extremely strong here because you now have a free Pot of Avarice if you needed to get it going right away. And if you had a Pot of Avarice and you wanted to use it here, you could have done that and kept going with the Substitute again. Instead of just summoning these out, you could send these and then use Pot of Avarice to draw 2. So that's the basic combos of this deck. I guess we'll look into weaknesses now. So this deck has a problem with the fact that it's very linear. Every turn you're going to summon a Monarch, and the Monarch's effect is going to be activated, and you're going to target something and destroy it. It's excellent in the sense that if you get going and you summon a Monarch every turn, most decks have a hard time coming back from that, especially when you top it off with a Light and Darkness Dragon. But there is things that you got to pay attention to. So for one, we have a DD Crow here. DD Crow, everyone sides it, everyone has it. Some decks even main deck it, so this is a card you got to watch out for. And the way you deal with this card here is in game 2 and 3, you're going to only Substitute or swap Frog for one Treeborn at a time. and this will allow them to, this will make them play into DD Crow right away as soon as possible, and then you'll know that they have removed their DD Crow from their hand, and you could send another Treeborn Frog to the graveyard for the next turn. But this can be devastating if you don't have much lined up and you need that Treeborn to tribute summon, and they have this. So you need to be very, very aware that this card can just come and mess up your day. Next, this deck has a problem with Solemn Judgment. Now, you could say that every deck has a problem with Solemn Judgment, but more so Monarchs, because since you're going to summon once per turn, if your opponent plays this on a really important turn where you need to Kaya something, you need to Ryza something, you need to do something that turn specifically, and they have the Solemn Judgment, that's where it's going to really hurt and probably make you lose the game. So that's obviously how you beat Monarchs, but this is also how you need to be aware of these things and watch for this stuff. Cards like Royal Oppression and Skill Drain, these cards are very strong too. I didn't bring any out on hand, but if you played any Edison games, you're probably aware of what these cards do, but I'll have them on screen here for you guys. Next is the fact that if your opponent knows what you're playing, they could simply do one card per turn. So for example, I have a Bottomless Trap Hole. I could just set this, and my opponent goes and he summons a dude, and then he summons a Monarch, and I activate Bottomless in response to the summon. He lost a Monarch, I got a Bottomless, and I'll take no damage this turn. And a way around that is to summon Swap Frogs with no effect to poke them for 1,000 damage. So why other people have incorporated hero cards or junk synchron cards into the deck list to make it more of a, you don't have to summon a Monarch every turn, but also to get a little bit more defense on the turns that a Monarch might not be as impactful. So these are the main cards that I would say you got to watch out for. And then obviously we got to talk about a few things that are more of conditional on the field. So, I almost forgot about this card. This card is seeing a lot more play, definitely dangerous. Another reason why you don't send all your DD Crows to the graveyard at once. But anyways, so cards that stop special summoning is a problem, because a lot of your cards like Battle Fader, Treeborn Frog, Swap Frog, just your whole core engine that facilitates dropping a Monarch every turn usually requires a special summon. So cards like this, Fossil Dyna, Royal Oppression, these are all very scary cards. This is also the reason why you play a bunch of stuff in your side deck to get rid of these things, or more so just save your soul exchanges game 2 and 3 to try and drop it on this. Especially fairies are quite popular, Arcelor Christia, these kind of things. That's pretty much it for the weaknesses. There's a reason why it's a very strong deck. It's a simple deck to play, not very high skill ceiling, but there's a lot of intricate ideas that you have to do while playing the deck, because you need to be getting more and more advantage through cards in your hand or Monarch effects activating. So you need to really know what exactly you're going to be doing every turn, rather than just, okay, well, I have a guy here, I'm just going to drop a Monarch. No, like, you need to make sure, like, your opponent attacks you for, 1,400, you're okay with taking 1,400. You don't need to use Battle Fader. You want to save the Faders for big pushes and things like that. But in the same respect, Monarchs can have a problem with cards that are just large, that chunk damage you over a Monarch. Blackwing is very good at that, which is another reason why Blackwing is one of the best decks, because they have Clute. So these kind of things are something that you have to watch out for games 2 and 3, as well as the side decking aspect with Monarchs. Okay, so lastly, I'm just going to show you guys a quick rundown of some matchups, so you'll understand, and then we'll call it a day. Hopefully you've stuck around and really learned something here. So for the mirror match, we'll just put a Caius here. I think that in the mirror match, you want to play as little cards as possible until you have to. The first person to play a card and it get Monarched is going to be probably the loser. Very, very, very easy to see that because you have to tribute someone on their guy. So you're going to want to use Swap Frogs to poke through with life point damages. Yeah, that's basically it. Soul Exchange, DD Crows. mainly just rely on swap frogs. So that's Caius. That's for the Monarchs. Next we have Fairies. Fairies is a very difficult matchup because when you summon your card, you must activate the effect. I got sunlight on my table now. You activate their effect, and when you use their effect, they can use Herald of Orange Light, and also Christia really hurts you because you need to use Trueborn Frog or Swap Frogs or Battle Faders, so they can summon this when they're going to attack for game, and then just go in, and you can't use Gores, Trag, or Battle Faders. So I would say that this is more of a bad matchup, but you never know. You get going, and your opponent keeps setting like, Shining Angels and stuff, then yeah, you could just destroy them. Next we have Dragons. So Dragons is pretty straightforward. You're going to want to try and get a hold of a Battle Fader as quickly as possible. So using a Pot of Avarice early is fine. You're going to want to try and dupe block them. You're really looking for ways to stop the one shot and make them really commit one dragon at a time, where you're allowed to Caius them, Rise of them, the Stelos them, all these kind of things. Light and Darkness Dragon can squish in with this thing, kill itself, and then get another card out. And you're going to want to hit this card specifically, this deck, with a Vanity's Fiend, this kind of thing. Deity Crow, Soul Exchange, all general good cards, but you're really watching out for the one shot, so try to conserve your Battle Faders as much as possible. Sometimes it's even worth it to take the 28 to the face just to save your Fader for the next turn. We got Blackwing or Vayu Turbo. This deck is a little bit annoying because it can main deck Royal Oppression and it doesn't hurt itself. So you got to watch out for Royal Oppression when you're playing. Think about, like, if I summon this card here and did this and they had Royal Oppression, would I lose? And how can I play this turn without getting completely booty blasted by Royal Oppression? So that's an annoying thing. Also, Colute is a very, very damaging thing versus you, because you'll get chunked for damage, which is much worse because you can't Fader that, you can't Gores that. You're just gonna get chunked over your Caius for whatever reason. Another reason why you want to just target the monsters too, because your opponent could Icarus attack even if they chose to target their own cards, and that would be pretty bad. As well as Colute is a card. The same thing kind of goes with Lightsworn too. They could chunk you with Honest, I suppose, but Lightsworn's a little bit more manageable since you have many cards to get through that outside of Light and Darkness Dragon. Light and Darkness Dragon's pretty bad versus Lightsworn. This card in particular, or this deck in particular, you also want to watch out for opportunities where you can Fistelos or Light and Darkness Dragon for a free advantage a card. For example, my opponent summons this card, adds something to their hand, and sets a back row. That is the time when you would want to use the Stelos, because you're often not going to be able to get through this. But yeah, another thing is when you are playing against Blackwing, you want to immediately try to remove the Black Whirlwind as soon as possible. Your whole game plan is advantage, so you don't want them to get advantage like that. Next we have Zombies. Zombies is a combo deck, so anything to do with Deity Crow or Disruption like that, they're going to do the same to you. But you're going to just really save your Battle Faders, Gores, Trag, and this kind of thing for the all-in, and then you can easily dismantle this board. I would say this is a very good matchup for you if you're playing Frog Monarch. I don't really have issues with this stuff unless you draw bad. And lastly, a popular deck is Heroes. Heroes is a kind of a toss-up because there's a lot of things that they can just summon that are large, like Elemental Hero Alias, that you might want to take 1 or 2 hits, but it adds up. And they have Honests. They also have Absolute Zero, which is a pain in the ass for your deck to deal with, because even if you Monarch it, you will do whatever to it, it's just still going to wipe your board and leave you open for another Alias poke or a push for game if they have some sort of like Absolute Zero play and you don't have a Fader. So hopefully you learned something today. hopefully you stuck around. I really hope that this was enough information for you guys to take this to the tournament and hopefully take down a Time Wizard event in your locals or your regionals. And thanks for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.